All right, you're good to go.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, sounds good. Hello, everyone. Yeah. All right. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to each just introduce ourselves and then wait for people to ask questions? All right, cool. I guess I'll start. So, hi everyone, my name is Joy. I am the founder and director of the HackOR hackathon, and I am a gap year student. Next year, I'll be going to the UPenn in the MT program and studying double majoring in computer science and undecided. But I have my experience in terms of getting internships. I've certainly been on the receiving end of getting internships because I've been applying to internships during my gap year and ended up at a few opportunities. And I have some some advice to share with that, but I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but glad to share my own experiences. And yeah. Someone else want to go?
Sure, yeah. I'm Aaron. I am an organizer at HackOR, and I am also a gap year student. I'm going to Oregon State University next year to study computer science and maybe computer engineering. I haven't decided yet, maybe double major. And my experience with internships, in high school, I did like two of them. I did a software developer internship and then like a penetration testing internship. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll pass it on to Abinaya.
Thanks. So my name is Abinaya. I'm a high school sophomore from North Brunswick, New Jersey. My experience with internships is a bit rocky because I'm very bad at getting internships at like big, like built out companies through the standard interviewing process. But I do know like kind of the ins and outs of connecting with people and getting internships in less like organized and standardized ways. So I've had three internships before, and all of them were kind of like brought about by interesting stories or scenarios. So happy to talk about them.
Hi, I'm Cecilia. I'm a PhD student out at Arizona State University studying hackathons. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to study y'all. I really enjoy coming to these things and getting a chance to share some experience that I've had. So I'm a software engineer, and I've had internships at Garmin and PayPal, and I've also done the research side of things. So I've done a variety of high-level things like computer vision when I was an undergrad, but I also totally understand the struggles of handling interviews, all that stuff. So hopefully I can pass on things so y'all don't have to deal with my life of difficulty.
Yeah, so does anyone have any questions to start out? And feel free to unmute your mic and ask any questions or ask in the chat. Yeah, anything for us?
Also, do you know, like, will YouTube viewers be able to see the comments, or should we like read them?
The YouTubers wouldn't be able to see the chat, so we should read them. Yeah. Right. Questions, anyone? Let's see. I have a list of questions too that we can talk about. So I think we all talked a little bit about what internships we've had in STEM. I guess we can talk about what is your favorite internship that we had so far, the best one we've been in, and what makes a good internship versus not good internship. Yes, right. Who wants to start?
So I'll start. I've only done two, so it's like a choice between two. But my favorite internship was the most recent one I did. I did it for like a year and a half because I enjoyed it so much, and I ended up turning into a job, which I did like a couple weeks ago. But anyway, it was really interesting because I did a ton of things. So like I just like learned from like a vast field of things. So like it started off as penetration testing. I did like penetration testing contracts, and then worked with Galwa, which is like a company and based in Portland that does security stuff. It was like not really software development, more just like configuration things, but uh, it was like it was supposed to be a penetration testing internship, and then it turned into like this, like all kinds of different things. Like later in the year, I did software development for a few months, and that's what the job ended up being, was software development after that. I learned a bunch of different languages and like tools and stuff. It was really cool. I learned so much from that. It's really cool, like working under people who know a lot more than you.
Nice. That's a great story.
Yeah.
I think my favorite internship is also the most recent one. I don't have a lot to talk about it because I started it last Monday, but so far it's already been a great internship, and I think it's just because the learning curve is so steep that even though I struggle in the first few weeks, that also means that that's the time that I learn the most, and I get the most experience out of it. I think it's my favorite so far because it's been the most different from any other one that I've done. I think mainly it's because the team is super, super small. So it's just like me and the CTO being the only engineers on the team. So you do a lot of the work and you take a lot of the responsibility, but that also means that you learn a lot of new things. And I think the most fun part of it is that the CTO, the guy that I'm working under, is like super mean and super forward. So I kind of get yelled at every day, but that also makes every new day like a learning experience and something like new that I can get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, not sure about the yelled at every day part. It definitely depends on the person. But I'm glad you're enjoying your current internship. I also feel the same way. You know, my favorite one is the one I'm in now. And I think what makes a really good internship is being able to have opportunities. Because sometimes people want interns. Oh, I see a question in there. We'll get to you. Thank you. I know. Yeah. So I think what makes a really good internship is the opportunity, giving you opportunity to grow. And I think sometimes at some companies, they just hire interns. It's probably why they hire interns to do the grunt work. But I really like my current internship because they give you a lot of room. Like, hey, you want to work on this? That's like completely okay. And I even got to do some of the non-technical side of things, which is kind of fun for me. And overall, I even like for me, I got 2 offers other than my current internship, but eventually decided over summer to stick with my current one just because of all the opportunities they have to offer. Yeah, so I think that just the ability to grow is something I personally look a lot into choosing an internship. And yeah, I'll pass it now to Cecilia, who has more experience.
I have more time in school. So my favorite internship is not my most recent. I hope they don't hear me because I'm going back next summer. It's not that I don't like them. It's having a COVID internship makes things totally different. So my previous internship was with Garmin, and I cried the day I left because I was so upset to be leaving. But I had to because it just the values I had and the like things that I wanted for myself didn't align with me pursuing my PhD. But I stayed with Garmin for a year and a half, I think, at least a couple months. I was doing work in their aviation department, and much like Aaron mentioned, how you're like jumping around doing tons of different stuff. I My day was spent jumping between Python, C, and Java at any given instance. And it was like, cool, totally new code bases that my team isn't even on. I'm making stuff that directly affects my team. And from that internship, I realized how much I love having like immediate user feedback. I love doing full stack. I like having the chance to design for users, but I prefer most definitely having immediate feedback. I'm like, here's my script, go break it. Like, test it out. And they would get back to me because I knew they were using it. I was developing stuff that they needed. So I was doing a bit of the grunt work that they didn't have time to do, but it was also things that they knew would challenge me. And so because I kept taking all those challenges, they kept giving me more and more. But I also had a really great working relationship with my team. So much so that I made them all like these little gifts at the end for internal team jokes that we had. just because they fostered me so well in elevating my confidence and assuring me that I was absolutely capable in anything I sought out to do. And they were honestly, I would love to say that they're my friends. I reach out to them every so often to check in on them. I know that some other people on my team were like, you cannot leave. We will not let you. We'll figure out a way to hire you as a contractor, even though that's totally not what Garmin does in that instance. So it was really nice to know that at least in some way, I was loved while I was there, not just for the work that I did, but for the person I am and was. So that was definitely my favorite internship, and I would definitely say that that worked for me. That was what I needed, because that was what enabled me to pursue more confidently other jobs, and like start looking for like, who do I want to work for next? What else do I want to learn? They definitely jump started that for me.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel the fact that also you have a lot more experience that you're also able to provide more long-term insight, which I appreciate. And then we have another question, which is how do internships in STEM differ from internships in other industries? Yeah. So personally, I probably wouldn't be able to answer this question as much, so I'll defer to the others since I have probably limited experience in internships in STEM too. So
I think I can talk about this a little bit, but my experiences vary from like position to position and company to company. But I think generally from what I've experienced from STEM to like not engineering, they're pretty similar, especially when you're working in like startups and nonprofits and just like smaller teams in general. You see kind of the same work ethic when you have like in both teams. Like in the first one, it was a nonprofit. I was super young, but they took me in because again, the team was very small and they just needed people to do their work. Um, so I got to take on a bunch of different tasks, like mainly non-engineering. A lot of it was like event planning, like a little bit of like app designing for their conference, a lot of like organization and like sometimes even making like copy or design for their like new initiatives or whatever it was. But again, it was just like sprinkling in things here and there. And I learned a lot about how to communicate myself properly, like on the internet and like when writing copy and things that are user facing. And then also like working within teams and just being like overall a good team player. So that was like a non-engineering type of experience, but an engineering experience, it's I think it's pretty similar, but also very, very different. It depends on whether you're working in a startup or in an actual company and whether it's like one project that's like extending over a long period of time or a bunch of different projects. I've had one experience which was at the MTA, which was pretty much just like one project for 6 months. And I think the main difference was that we worked on this long term, like especially, and then we also had like sprints to break up the different like features or tasks that we were working on for that larger project. And I think that kind of organization is something that I didn't experience as much when I was working in a non-STEM job.
I want to definitely echo that, all of that. The purpose of the internship is absolutely the same. You're there to learn, you're there to get like real world experience, so to speak. And in many cases, a well structured internship will take you along for the ride and kind of inject you in ways that have real life impact. Whether it's you're a business major and you're working in HR or you're working in analytics, I have friends who did HR work, and I have friends who did the HR side of things with, again, analytics. So in some ways, they were doing a little bit of stuff like us, like using spreadsheets, doing calculations, doing a bit of scripting. And in other cases, sometimes they're more focused on the human interaction. They're dealing with customer service, dealing with people directly, doing project management even. And then, so you're still gaining the experiences that are necessary for the role that you're in and still working with different types of people. Whereas engineering still has those aspects. The priority is often more so creating like physical or digital components to help your team, help the overall company. And that can range even. You might even be doing novel projects that they're like, we don't have time to implement this, but here's your baby for the summer. Like figure it out for us. And maybe, that'll be something that they're like, yeah, this like shaped our whole company and how we should do things. And other times it's like, yeah, it was a good idea. I don't think it was the right direction, but now we have at least a sample to go off of. So it's not like the work you're doing is going to be just tossed aside. It does have benefit, it has worth. At least presuming the internship is good or the company is good and has good intention, it will still result in a good outcome.
Yeah, if they're paying you, they're getting value out of it.
I think, like, lastly, I can echo what Cecilia was saying about there's a lot of just, I'm giving you this task, now deal with it, finish it, like, give it back to me in a week and tell me what you did. There's structure to it, like in the sprints and the tasks. And then there's also like what you were mentioning, like the novel projects of just like, make this your baby and figure it out for me so that maybe we can use it later. So those are definitely huge learning experiences. And at the end of it, I think the main point is just like whether the company uses it or not, you, no matter what, have learned a lot from making that your own baby and just like working on it and learning something brand new. So I think it's definitely still useful.
Yeah, I think we have two more questions. So the first one is, how do each of us found our internships? So I can probably go first. I actually found all my internships so far that was accepted in from hackathons. Um, and that's pretty interesting. The second one is less direct than the first one, but so my first internship, I found it because one of the hackathons I've been to, they had something called a resume book, and they would just take your resumes and they would just send it to different companies. And I did those because I was like, why not? And I sent my resume through a resume book. And the thing with resume books is that companies don't really like admit you based on the resume book, but they sort of use that to send you information. So a company in Atlanta, they were like, oh yeah, here is information on this job. We saw your resume. I bet they didn't even read my resume. They're just like, oh yeah, here it is. Apply to this. So I applied to that job. And I told them I went to a bunch of hackathons before. And they were like, oh yeah, we're looking for people who are, going to hackathons. And then I got the internship and I was like, whoa, hackathons are cool. And the second one is less so direct and more so about the making connection side of a hackathon. But at a hackathon, I met this person at a teammate on a hackathon, and my teammate later on worked on another company, and I thought that company was pretty cool. So I was like, hey, how is that your job there? And is there any way you can also get involved? And that's how I got my current job. So I think, the both ways are really sort of good examples. Not to plug hackathons, like these are legit things that happen. But they're like sort of good examples to show why, the networking side to get you jobs and also just applying everywhere. But for me, I also during my gap year, I applied to a lot of places and I didn't get into them. So I think it's just also probability. Yeah. Someone else want to answer how they got their jobs? I'll pass it to Aaron now, maybe.
All right. For me, both of the internships I had were like only because of networking. So in my case, I was like looking for internships, so I like applied to a bunch of them, and I actually like I got a couple offers, but I like know someone who works in government, and they contacted me that summer and said like, hey, I know like our organization is looking for an intern, and he's like, I can probably get you an interview. So I ended up getting an interview. It was going to be for like a QA job at first, but uh, like I don't know. I guess I did well or something because I ended up promoting me to a like software developer. So I worked on some really cool projects that year in government. That was awesome. Uh, then the next one was because I ran into an old friend at Costco and like while I was shopping with my dad, and uh, like I knew him when I was really young because he was like a friend's dad or something in my old school, and uh, we were just like talking. I was like, "What do you work in?" And he said, "I work in computer security," and I was like, "No way, that's what I'm interested in." And so it all went downhill from there. So like I ended up getting an internship there, first intern. It was fun. And then of course, like he has all these connections in the field. So that's like yeah, like I've been working a lot for like a bunch of different people, you know, it's like through contract through the internship. So that's me. I'll pass it off to Abinaya.
Yeah, definitely. So I think kind of like similar to what you were saying, a lot of it is just about the person who you are and like how proactive you are about finding opportunities. Because I find that like you can spam your resume in like a bunch of different like job sites and just like different companies listings, but it's also about like making meaningful connections and just like talking to people and reaching out to them and seeing like who like where in your network and your connections is there a possible connection to a company that you might want to work at or somewhere that you want to be or you would get a good experience from. So my first one was when I was very young and it was through a cold email. But essentially, I had heard about this program called Global Teen Leaders, and they're just like a bunch of teens who are super smart and like have their own nonprofits and everything. And one of the people who was the winner for that, she was starting a nonprofit for period poverty and like period equity and around that whole space. So that summer, I was like, after seventh grade and just like really looking to do something for the summer and wanting experience. So I cold emailed her saying, I'll do whatever you want, but take me, I want to learn. And she liked that. And she was also looking for young people to like work and help with tasks around the nonprofit. So that was my first internship, which was very fun and a great experience. Also like a non-technical internship. So diverse and cool and interesting. I'll talk about one other internship that I had, which was at the MTA. And similar to what Joy said, I got it through a hackathon. And essentially, me and this other team of super amazing people, we were the grand prize winners of a hackathon that was like Microsoft X MTA. And MTA is like the public transit company that like powers New York City. So it's pretty big and it like impacts a lot of people. So they hosted this hackathon so that people could essentially develop projects for how the MTA could evolve in a pandemic because public transportation had changed so much over the last couple months. So our project was they liked it a lot, so they offered us all internships for the next like however long it would take for us to implement that project.
Nice. So I'm an introvert. I didn't have a network in undergrad. I was too busy trying to put myself through school. I was like working at the tutoring center and finding every job I could. So even though I went to hackathons, it was really hard to network. And I also had the wrong mentality, which was I want to get in of my own skill, not because someone else got me in. And which is not the right idea. Don't do that. That's super like that's a way to definitely like shut a ton of doors. And I don't know why it is I thought that. I think maybe that's because like there's a engineering tends to create imposter syndrome and a bunch of other stuff that a lot of different people end up experiencing. And so like blindsided by that, I guess I thought that was the way to stand out. So my internships were found through cold applying, and I found Garmin through my university's career fair, and the next internship I found, PayPal, was through a Women in Technology conference called GHC, the Grace Hopper Celebration. And for the last 4 years, I think I've been going to there just to start building my network, to start learning about companies because I have really, really specific morals that I want to align with. And so now that I kind of have time, surprisingly, because I'm doing a PhD, I'm able to do a lot more research on companies. So I'm really picky about who I want to work with now that I know more about how Google works and how Facebook works and how other companies have changed their missions over time. And I have additional benefit in the sense that my dad is an engineer, where he's part of an older culture of engineering where there's a lot of people who use nepotism to get in. And maybe that was also the fuel for like me being like, I can't use anyone to get in. I have to do it on my own, which again, not good. Just don't do nepotism. That's bad. Um, so I did everything on my own. And that was really hard. And I would never recommend it to someone to do it again. But on the other hand, for me who struggles with imposter syndrome, getting those internships meant so much more to me because I knew it was my skill that stood out. It wasn't someone's recommendation or just opportunity. It was I made it. And that's what I needed to be successful and be confident in myself. And that's not to say that there's no less merit in using your network. I really want to emphasize that using your network is just as effective. I just had other problems when I was in undergrad. So I definitely went about it the standard way. These days, I would probably be more open to using my network. But now that I've shown that my skill can get me in, I want to see how far I can push it and where I can go and how many different interview tests I can run through and can kind of compare them. So I've interviewed with a bunch of different companies by this point. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, I saw how you guys interviewed. I saw how y'all did. And now I can use that as like my study base and also how to help everybody else who might also be going through the typical like pipeline of, okay, I cold applied, I got called in, now what?
Oh, thank you, everyone, for your input. I think that also answers Victoria's question on what's a piece of advice you give yourself when you're applying to internships, more or less. So if everyone's okay, I think I'll move on to the next question.
Wait,
I think
actually,
oh,
sorry.
yeah, no
I
worries.
thought about an answer to that question. And more specifically, it was kind of similar to I think what Cecilia was referring to about like imposter syndrome and just like putting yourself down or relying too much on like raw skill. But mine is I'm preparing for my first official like technical interview, which is in 2 weeks. And I don't really have much experience in it, but for my like 2 days of leak coding and like studying data structures, I've given myself the advice of stop putting yourself down before you've even had the interview or have even finished preparing for it. Because I know that like grinding leak code or like studying for technical interviews, it can get pretty difficult, especially when you feel like you're not getting the answer correct on the first try, or your runtime is always too slow, or you never come to the like right solution. Like that was me for like 5 hours today. And at the end of that, I was like, oh, why are you even doing this? You're not skilled enough. But that kind of just like again shuts all of your own doors, which is not what you want to do. You want to be opening them. So I think regardless of how much skill you have and how much experience you have or how qualified you think you are for the position, just go for it, because if you have an interview, that's pretty lucky in itself and you've already done a great job. So there's really no harm in trying and going for it.
It's facts.
True. But yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So I think E. Jackson asked the question. I'm not a little bit sure about that. He said earlier, or she, or anyway, he said earlier you asked that an intern is the groundwork of a company. So wouldn't that mean that the intern is one of the more important roles? And I think this is something that Abinaya said or Cecilia. Don't know who is the one that said intern is the groundwork of a company. So they could elaborate.
I don't remember saying it, but I can say that an intern definitely plays a valuable role in a couple of different ways. Bringing on interns kind of tests the ability to bring on full-time employees, in the sense of like if you're onboarding someone who's an undergrad or high school or whatever their level might be, like it's not only a matter of their skill to come up to speed, but also a matter of the company's ability to communicate with that person to bring them up to speed. It's a conversation. An internship is as much an interview, quote unquote, for whether or not you want to stay with the company to pursue full time, as it is for them to decide do they want to keep you full time when you enter that rank. And so interns are one, a good opportunity for figuring out if this person would make a good full-time employee. Two, a good way to test out, is our onboarding like reasonable? Is it suitable? Like, what do we have to change? Um, it's also good for with the way that companies work, there is always going to be work that is pushed to the side, left undone, ignored, even though it's important and it has to get done, or it would be valuable if someone tested it out. But there's just not enough bandwidth. And having an intern creates that, it gives you that extra bandwidth. It's not the bandwidth of a full-time employee who's experienced, but it is still bandwidth that someone can at least push a little further than just not starting at all. And another instance is just it's a chance to just see, like, can you even support interns? Because interns are a responsibility to the future of the company as well as the future of wherever they may go. So there's a lot of benefit to interns. It's just making sure that you support them effectively. And so ideally, you should be paid for your work. And so paid internships are great. In fact, I would always recommend them. But I also understand that unpaid internships bring a very different set of expectations, criteria, and responsibilities, which is sometimes it's you need the experience on your resume, and that's absolutely valid. Sometimes we're put in a position that we can't say no. For example, I was putting myself through like school with extra stuff that I needed, and because I didn't want to burden my parents. So like if I had an unpaid internship, I probably would have taken it because it was still something I could put on my resume, even though it was like, yeah, I'm gonna bite the bullet on cost for a bunch of stuff, you know. But at the same time, there are risks with unpaid internships in that you might be undervalued, is I guess the way I would put it. You risk someone taking advantage of you, and it might be a bad experience, which is unideal, and it's not a healthy way to foster the future of STEM, engineering, or wherever the field of interest you're working in is. But it's sometimes unavoidable, and it's a very hard tightrope to walk between what you need, what you want, what they're giving you. Because at the end of the day, a corporation or a company or even a nonprofit, they are bigger than you, the individual, which is a hard pill to swallow. And there's a lot of like politics and thoughts that go around with that. All that to say, like, yes, interns are absolutely important, but you yourself as the individual are also important, and your values drive what you do.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add on to that? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think
Okay. I think I can add on to that a
Yes.
little bit. The intern is quite valuable and quite powerful, especially in startups. I think Cecilia gave like a super good understanding of what it's like from like a company perspective. But like first of all, as an intern, you learn so much. And especially at a smaller company, I know that there is always like the cost issue, especially when startups usually don't pay interns because they don't have fundraising or money themselves. But I definitely think that it's like a very valuable learning experience in terms of just like gaining a lot of experience on working fast paced and working on a lot of different things that you get an idea of how to work in teams, how to work in cycles, how to work efficiently, and how to learn new things. And sometimes it's not even just like the technologies that you're learning, but how you learn those technologies. So all parts of learning in an internship are valuable. And also how valuable you are to the company is also yes, you are valuable because in a small company, they literally don't have people like full-time workers to pay to do the work for them. So often they're relying on interns to do a lot of the work or to help around in the places that, again, like for tasks that they're putting onto the side. So the intern is needed and the intern is valuable. And then even for larger companies that do like big internship cycles or like Facebook, Google, like the summer internship programs, they also need interns. Again, like what Cecilia was saying, so that they know if their onboarding process is good, but also so that they have good talent that they can kind of like refer or pull back into that cycle and offer full-time positions, because they know that if the student has done an internship in their undergrad or grad, whatever it is, that kind of like prepares them well for being a full-time employee. So they're more likely to bring them back into that company later.
And also, like Abinaya was saying before, that she was working under the CTO. I had like the same situation in like the most recent internship I did. And one of the like biggest things for me was like communication. Like I learned so much about just like how to communicate problems and like understand problems, figure out like what's missing when my boss is trying to tell me like about some specific problem. Like that also kind of goes into the next question, like some do's and don'ts of internships. Like just like don't worry you if like you're asked to like revise your work and stuff, because it's probably not your fault. Like it's probably not your fault. It's just like a communication problem, and you get better at communication over time. And it's not just you, it's like your boss. It's a communication between the two of you. So yeah.
Yeah, sort of transitioning into the do's and don'ts of internship. What Erin said reminded me of it's sort of an internship, but it's also sort of unpaid. Something that I did not good. And I want you guys to all of you guys know. So at a nonprofit, I was sort of volunteering for, so it's not technically an internship. I was not communicating very well with the person. This was a while ago, but my sort of boss person, I was sort of assigned to work on a feature, and it's like one of those situations that we previously talked about. That's like, oh, this is a feature, we'll give it to you. Now work on it, and have something at the end of this internship. And I went into it thinking, okay, I'll just try to get all of this done myself. And when I had any questions, I didn't ask questions at all, because I thought asking questions would show them that I am incompetent. So I was like, no, you must figure this out yourself. And later on, when the internships almost over, I sort of realized if I just asked, I would have saved so much time. Like every time I didn't ask, I would waste a lot more time trying to figure out how it worked, when just paying them, when like they'll just let me know what the answer is in like 5 minutes, I'll solve the problem. But at the same time, I still do this with reservation. Like sometimes I still try to not ask them with questions, which is something that I feel like you shouldn't always do. But like for very small questions, I try to not ask them. But overall, I would definitely ask more questions. And if you don't know something, like don't feel bad. Like it's actually communicating is very important, because at the end of that sort of session for me, I was very independent, and I realized I didn't know a lot of get to know the other people very well, also because I didn't communicate with them as much. So definitely try to communicate and ask them questions. Yeah, that's sort of my take. Yeah.
I definitely want to build on that. I think the rule of thumb I've been given for asking questions, because I'm getting better at it, but I definitely struggle with it, where I'm like, I have to figure it out myself. Or I've also wasted time at my own internship doing that. And even like there are times where even in my homework, I could have like asked a friend for help or asked the teacher, and that would have saved me like days of struggling. The rule of thumb that I've always heard, at least I've been told when I was at work, is try and figure it out on your own, because then you avoid asking quote unquote stupid questions. Because even though there's no actual stupid questions are, the asterisk on them is when you can go Google it and it's like the first link that comes back. And that's your answer. That's pretty rough and kind of embarrassing. But for when you're trying to figure out a problem and you're debugging and you're stepping through it, if you've spent more than an hour on it, like you're reaching that hour and a half mark almost, and you're like you haven't made any progress. Like maybe you understand a little bit, but there's just terms or there's something in the code, or it just isn't making sense. Ask. Because no, we moved on to the next question. We transitioned really smoothly. It's yeah. So if you can figure it out, chances are it'll take you about like an hour and a half to figure it out. Well, any longer than that, you should definitely ask a question. So that way you can either be like, hey, I really want to figure this out on my own, but I'm stuck right here, if that's your concern. Or it might be like, oh my gosh, that was not something that you should have had to spend so long on. Like, here's the like page that would have walked you through it instead of you digging into it like you might have been. So I've been on both sides where it was a really easy question and it was like, oh, I missed the concept. And I've also been on the other side where it was internal knowledge that I never would have found unless I'd asked. And that happens. It's called tribal knowledge, and you find it when people have been at their job for like more than a few years because they know all the internal lingo, but you, the newbie, totally doesn't. And so part of the company or the nonprofit or the startup's job is to like teach you that and to pass on that knowledge to you.
And like specifically for questions that are about like the problem that you're given, like when your boss wants you to like work on a project or like a small project or something, those. Okay, so like my boss, my last company, he was the kind of person who like didn't like when I like asked. Oh yeah, it's not that he didn't like questions. He just didn't want me to ask like meaningless questions or like questions that like I could have figured out on my own because it was like me and him. It was like a small company, so he didn't want to get distracted from his work or whatever. So what I learned is that like you should look at the problem that you're given and figure out like think about it and figure out like, do I know everything about this like to tackle this? Obviously, like you can't completely answer that yet, but like figure out, are there any holes, like anything you don't completely understand, and like try to figure that out at the start so that you can ask him well, like you have already taken his attention, like when he's giving you the project. Sorry, I'm using he referring to my boss, but yeah, just like for questions that are about your project, like try to figure that out at the start so you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I've been prone to like going head first into a project without even knowing what the requirement is. So like Aaron was saying, like just ask questions about it and know what you're doing before you dive into it, because I've also wasted a lot of time just thinking I know how to get to the answer, but actually not even knowing what I'm being asked to do. So be clear on what you're doing and keep that goal in your head as you're working on it. Because I've also found that like especially when I'm learning something brand new, I can just go into a black hole of learning new things and putting new things into this like Python notebook, but not actually getting any closer to the goal he's trying to have me accomplish. Um, so always keeping that in your head and kind of just making sure that every step you're doing is moving you closer to that final goal. That will save you a lot of time and make it easier. And then similar to what Cecilia said, I've also heard like the 1 hour rule of if you've been working on it for an hour with no progress, just ask because it will always just like send you one step further. So I second that. A don't that I've learned recently is don't expect to get accustomed with what you're doing or just be like, a genius or an expert like from day one or week one or however long it is. You could be learning how to learn and learning how to actually approach problems for the entirety of your internship. And that just means that you're growing and you're getting better. So don't put yourself down if you're asking a lot of questions in the beginning, because that's good. That just means that you're putting yourself out there and you're open to learning new things and stepping out of your comfort zone.
Definitely don't put yourself down in front of your boss. Don't do that. Don't do that on day zero. Don't do that either. I did that. I was like, why'd y'all hire me? Like, I'm just curious. And that was the worst thing to ever ask because I was so low confidence at that instance. So my first day, they were like, here's a project. And they just kind of was like, how will this turn out? We thought we hired someone really good and now we're really concerned. And I ended up blowing them away. But they were like, at the end of the summer for that first instance for my like exit interview, they're like, okay, remember that day you visited us and you told us this? Do not ever do that again because we were super worried. I mean, we're not anymore, but like we were a little worried that time you came in. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. I realize that now. That was dumb. And so I'm willing to share this because I've obviously learned from it, but also because like I said, imposter syndrome and a variety of other things lead to a lot of concerning mentalities that are not supported or like they're they're fostered to grow in the worst way. And so part of like the work that I've been doing with my PhD has been to correct that in everyone that I meet and saying like you absolutely have value. You should be like confident. Like it is a little bit of fake it till you make it, but if you already have it, you just got to nurture it. Everybody has confidence. It's just you have to grow it. And having those opportunities to do so, or having mentors or people in your life that do that to help you, are absolutely valuable people you should keep in your life to really get you to reach the next goal, because you are absolutely capable of success in whatever it is that you intend to do. You got to show it, and that's a big that's definitely a big do for internships is be confident, but be humble. You're there to learn and you don't know everything. But if you show that you're willing to figure it out, you're willing to ask questions, you're willing to be the good soul that they need to do stuff and be friendly, it will go and take you miles more than just being like, I'm going to huddle in my box. This is the way I do things. And like isolating yourself is definitely a don't. Like I said, an internship is as much an interview of you and how you'll be in the company or whatever it is you're doing, as well as it is for you to understand, do you even like this company? Would you want to stay with them? Because they're trying to get you to stay. They need someone, 5 years down the road to come on and stay with them for a couple of years.
Just out of curiosity, maybe some people in the chat are also curious. When they said don't say this, is there anything in particular that you said that is like company sees this in the interview and they are just negative, or is it just overall lack of confidence?
For me, I directly told my boss after they hired me. I was there for like it was a visitation, meet your boss, see the company building. So like I'd sign the offer letter and everything. They could have dumped me if they really wanted to, because I'm in an at-will state. So they took a chance because it was like a month later that I came back and actually started the job. That's why I called it day zero, because it wasn't the first day where they gave me all the forms or anything. For interviews, I would definitely say some don'ts are to I guess for interviews, you don't want to come across arrogant. Like, as I mentioned, you are there to learn, but you don't know everything. So be humble. I have many friends who are full-time employees at their company of their choosing, and I'm glad that they're happy in adulting. But now they're at a point where they are now hiring people. They're running the interviews, and so they call me in and my friends who are also PhD students to help them test interview questions, because we've all done interviews before, but we're still kind of like in it, I guess. And so as a result, will often hear stories from my friends who are doing these, about people who just flub it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, one that makes me feel better, because I'm like, I thought that question like took me too long or something. Like I thought it was a good question. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, now I can kind of see the other side where, um, for example, one of my friends, she was running the interview. And so she had someone who very firmly believed he could not answer the question without a very specific library call, like a third-party library call. And it was a concept that if he had just gone back to the basics, he would have absolutely been able to answer it. So not every solution has to be over the top or using a third party library. It's good that you know it. And you could even lead with that. Like, normally I would answer this question using this, but is that what you want? And so interviews are meant to be conversations. So asking, I know how to do it this way, but is that what you're trying to learn from me? Should we be doing it through like a manual thing? Like I should be building an array from scratch or something like that. Because if that's the case, then let's go ahead and do that. And if not, maybe the interview is like, sure, let's use your call. Let's move to the next stage of the problem. That was a great idea. It totally depends on the person. But if you don't see the question and you're so focused on your solution and you're not listening to the suggestions of the interviewer, um, it shows that you're not willing to listen. It shows that you're not willing to work with someone. And it shows that you're not really a fit for the person who's interviewing you, which is likely the person who you might work with on your team. Or it's possible that they're very similar to someone who you might work with on your team if you were to be hired. So being cautious, not overly cautious, like don't be meek and don't be like, okay, well, what do I do? You should definitely be asking questions that help you in the interview, but still show that you can work with them. As I mentioned, an interview is absolutely a conversation, presuming you have an interviewer who wants to have that conversation. I've definitely had interviewers who just like, here's the question, and then they just sit there and they're like this. And I'm like, I don't really want to work with you. So I'm just going to do the best I can. And yeah.
Yeah, and Does anyone else have anything else to add to that? Because I think we have about 6 minutes left, so maybe we can answer the last question that Bob is asking. Is getting an internship extremely competitive nowadays? And maybe is there a way we can phrase this question, or should we just answer it directly?
I think it's kind of asking what it's asking. I think that internships are always going to be competitive because there's a large pool of people, but there are also a huge pool of companies that want opportunities. I mean, that want employees and that want interns and that want full-time people or just like people working for their company. So it's going to be competitive, but I think the ratio of like software engineers or developers to companies with postings is like there's a big need. So it's not too bad as long as you try your best and you go through different routes to try and find an opportunity. And I also think that especially with everything being virtual now, it's become a little bit easier to find opportunities, maybe because you're not so restricted by the location of the company or like timings or something like that, time zones. I know that those are more flexible now that it's all virtual.
Oh, wait, Christina asked a question. Should you send in your resume anyway, even if you think you're underqualified for an internship? So I am not on the hiring side, but I've been to many workshops, and what they say at every workshop when you ask this is 100% yes. And I think for those workshops, people who are talking are actual hiring managers. So they're saying that even if you think you're underqualified for an internship, for example, if they say we only accept college students or we only accept people who know this and this and this, it still doesn't hurt to send in your resume. Yeah, so that's, I just want to offer my input. That's what I've heard, and yeah, anyone else has anything to add to that? Maybe we can make that our last question. Yeah.
I would say it depends. I do have, like I mentioned, friends in the workplace and family members. And unfortunately, there are some positions that are sometimes opened and for internal, and they have to have it be public in order to meet different criteria. So you can send your resume in anyway, and that's totally fine. And I have unfortunately been on the receiving end of a story about this, and I'm very upset with this person for doing this. But at the same time, I understand that their company told them to do it, where they had someone submit a resume and they weren't really qualified. They'd already had someone else in mind, but it fit the diversity requirements that they needed to do and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so they interviewed this person, and so this person answered, you know, why are you interested? It doesn't seem like I'm qualified for this position. And yeah, that person had to figure out on the fly how to interview this person, knowing that there was no intent of hiring them in the first place. I really dislike companies that do this. Sadly, that is a company that had in the push toward inclusivity and diversity. Unfortunately, that's the downside to some companies that do that. That's the grumpy sad answer, unfortunately, of that side of things.
Yeah, that is pretty unfortunate. And I think kind of like a closing statement to wrap this up is that it's always good, like Joy said, to apply for the internship and put yourself out there or for the offering or whatever it is. But then also don't throw yourself out there without knowing your own worth because I've done that too, and I've just put my resume on like every single startup I can find on some sort of like job listing page. And then I go back and I'm like, oh, why did I offer myself to them when I really don't care about the product or what they're doing or my values don't match with their values, similar to what Cecilia was saying earlier. don't do something if you can't see yourself actually working there in the future, because I know having offers like makes you feel good and validated by companies, but it's honestly it gets pretty tiring and brainwashing at the end of the day to just like put your resume on every single offering you see there. So be intentional, but also step out of your comfort zone. Just make sure that it's something that you're willing to do if you got that opportunity.
But yeah, I think just overall to summarize, with internships, summarize this workshop with internships is that, you should always try to be proactive and questions. There are stupid questions, but you should never be afraid of asking questions. It's like being afraid of asking questions and, being cautious of which questions to ask are different. And something you should not do. Can you guys help me summarize this? What do you think are some main points or takeaways? Yeah. But yeah, internships are good. You guys should apply. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming to this Q&A panel. And our next speaker is also Abinaya. So
You can find me on the Gather Town. I can send a link in the chat, but if any of you have questions on like internships that I've gotten, which is similar to the conversation we've had here, or the nonprofit that I started, just join me there. I'll be there to ask questions. But thank you all for being here.
yeah, thank you for being here too. And you can always feel free to take